Welcome. I'm Doug Morgan, and you're listening to Uncommon Sense, where we hunt for the truth in the topics you're not supposed to talk about, Christianity and politics. It seems like it was just yesterday that the Biden administration was hiring thousands of people to institute diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI policies, into our federal government. We were spending billions of taxpayer dollars on these racist policies promoted by bigoted employees. But now there is a new sheriff in town. Yeah. And he is trying to root out these deeply embedded bureaucrats. It kind of reminds me of when my parents would give me a pair of hand shears and give me the job of going out and trying to get rid of a bunch of morning glory. Have you ever experienced that? I mean, that stuff was nasty. The roots went everywhere, and you could pull on one vine and it would just keep on pulling up more roots. Well, the Trump administration is now trying to uproot a bunch of morning glory, and so far actually doing pretty well. An appeals court on Friday, according to the Daily Wire, said President Donald Trump can continue to slash diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI, programs from the federal government as a lawsuit plays out. The decision, rendered by a panel of 3 judges on the 4th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, reverses a nationwide injunction from the United States District Judge Adam Abelson is his name, who was appointed by former President Joe Biden. Shocker, right? 2 of these 3 judges said Abelson, I guess how you pronounce it, sweeping block went too far, is what they said. Though they said Trump's DEI-related orders could raise First Amendment concerns, according to Fox News. Now, shortly after taking office, Trump signed an executive order, and get this for a title, okay? This is a great title. Ending radical and wasteful government DEI programs and preferencing an initial rescissions of harmful executive orders and actions. That's the title of it. And the Office of Personnel Management then began implementing the order with a memo instructing agency heads to begin the purge of DEI offices and officials. Now, this is a quote, the Biden administration forced illegal and immoral discrimination programs going by the name Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, or DEI, into virtually all aspects of the federal government in areas ranging from airline safety to the military. This is what the Trump's his order reads. And it says this was a concerted effort stemming from President Biden's first day in office when he issued Executive Order 13985, entitled Advancing Racial Equity and Support for Underserved Communities Through the Federal Government. Now, under Biden, nearly every federal agency and entity submitted equity action plans. This is what they were to do. They were to submit equity action plans to detail the ways that they had furthered DEI's infiltration of the federal government. This is what the order says, and it continues by saying the public release of these plans demonstrated immense public waste and shameful discrimination. That ends today. Americans deserve a government committed to serving every person with equal dignity and respect, and to expending precious taxpayer resources only on making America great, unquote. Now, Trump's order has started to take effect across numerous agencies, including the Department of Interior, one of the wokest agencies in the federal government. As noted by Fox News, Trump is facing a second lawsuit challenging DEI-related orders. The suit was filed Wednesday in the D.C. District Court by NAACP Legal Defense Fund and Lambda Legal, repping the nonprofit advocacy organizations. White House spokesman Harrison Fields said in response that the radical leftists can either choose to swim against the tide and reject the overwhelming will of the people, or they can get on board and work with President Trump to advance his wildly popular agenda, as according to the New York Times. But just like that morning glory I was referring to that I had to uproot, cutting federal DEI workers isn't as easy as you might think. In fact, the Daily Wire's Luke Rosiak says that onerous federal regulations could stymie the Trump administration's efforts to lay off the most entrenched and highest paid government workers, and could perversely result in terminated DEI specialists being given preference for open jobs across the government. Now, this is an investigation that looked into this, and it's quite interesting. The quote here: reductions in force, or RIF, is how they shorten reductions in force. As government layoffs are known as RIF, are governed by complicated regulations that give extraordinary rights to people who have worked for the government the longest, even letting them bump or steal the job of someone below them. They often keep the same pay grade after nabbing a subordinate's job, resulting in overpaying the people to do menial jobs while getting rid of the, of course, freshest and most affordable talent. Quote, an RIF is going to leave the oldest, most entrenched bureaucrats in place and get rid of the youngest, lowest paid employees. And even they are going to have tickets to the front of the line for any future job openings. A longtime federal human resources officer told the Daily Wire this, and those who are bumped can in turn steal the job of someone with even less tenure, resulting in a chaotic and time-consuming cascade. So the losers at the end of this, bureaucratic game of musical chairs are paid severance. Then they are put on a list that grants them preference for any job the government subsequently hires for at any agency, giving them the opportunity to keep the severance and also be rehired. This is according to the Office of Personnel Management Workforce Reshaping Operations Handbook. Although the Trump administration will likely target the most useless, of course, or ideological positions for layoff, when it comes time to replace workers at more necessary jobs in the course of normal turnover, agencies may be forced to rehire the very people originally attracted to such low-value jobs. This could be the latest roadblock, of course, in the Trump administration's push to resecure the federal workforce and restructure it. This week alone, the Department of Education laid off half of its workforce. A judge overturned the terminations of 24,000 probationary employees from various governmental agencies, even though such new employees are supposed to be the easiest to fire, and the House of Representatives passed a funding bill that could be less than helpful in making layoffs stick. Now, the OPM handbook says that agencies must establish a career transition assistance program, or a CTAP, that gives special selection priority to well-qualified surplus and or displaced agency employees who apply for agency vacancies. This agency selection priority applies before the agency can select any other candidate from either within or without the outside the agency. They also must create what they call an ICTAP, which is an interagency career transition assistant plan, which does the same thing, but for any federal job, even at other agencies. So federal regulations make clear that managers must hire laid-off employees for open positions, even though they, and this is the quote, may not equate to the highly or best qualified person. They must merely meet the minimum qualifications on paper. For example, like having a college degree, for instance. Quote, let's say they were laid off from a DEI role at HUD, but apply for a management analysis position at USDA. If a human resources specialist says they meet the minimum qualifications, they get the job before the hiring manager can even interview other people. This is of course, this is directly from a human resources officer. Now, the official spoke on, of course, conditions of anonymity because he is currently employed in a non-political federal job, and he supports widespread government reductions, but cautioned that they could backfire if they are not done strategically with the labyrinth of rules, laws, and union provisions in mind. Quote, it's very important to keep these people out of government. They had a crazy ideological agenda, which none of us as career civil servants should have, he said. And he said this of the employees hired into DEI and other activism roles. But people coming from the private sector might underestimate the number of landmines planted by decades of civil service laws and rules and union contracts that could result in their just slipping into other roles and continuing to peddle their ideas, potentially in the positions with more influence, actually. So how do federal layoffs work? Well, a RIF targets positions, not individuals. So government managers must specify a unit of the office within which the RIF will occur, called a competitive area. If there are positions in the unit that are not eliminated, people whose positions were eliminated can steal those jobs from colleagues with lower status rankings. Under the law, that ranking comes from number 1, tenure of employment, number 2, military preference, and number 3, length of service, and lastly, efficiency or performance ratings. So under OPM regulations, tenure is the most important. Performance ratings can only be used as a tiebreaker. Yeah. So if you're good at your job, well, we don't really care about that unless, everything else is equal. But when agencies have an entire office, dedicated to DEI, bumping can be avoided. Every position in the competitive unit can be eliminated. The problem is that many agencies have 1 or 2 DEI positions scattered among various offices. And that means that the DEI hires could steal the position of someone else in the unit, such as a general human resources position, let's say. If the government simply hires no one, then the ICTAP priority hiring problem would be moot. And it's unlikely that no hiring will occur, but extensive layoffs going well beyond DEI offices could prevent the worst employees from being rehired, since hiring managers will at least have a broader pool of recycled employees to choose from. Well, on February 26th, OPM and the Office of Management and Budget told agencies that layoffs should be done in accordance with the OPM handbook, but on an expedited timetable. Agencies were instructed to identify the competitive areas subject to RIF by March 13th. Then they should spend a month developing a totem pole rankings used in bumping. That's a complicated task involving the review of many employees' personal file, though there is software called Auto RIF that can help. And around April 13th, agencies should provide notice of layoffs. Typically, 60-day notice is required, but OPM can shorten that to 30 days. And that would result in positions being eliminated around May 13th or so. Or at least that's when the bumping would begin. So that's an optimistic timetable. And layoffs can be appealed to the Merit System Protection Board, which has already blocked numerous actions by the Trump administration or other offices, such as the Federal Labor Relations Authority and things like that. MSPB can rule that a layoff was unnecessary or inappropriate, and the best way to counter that is for Congress to slash agencies' funding. It is hard to argue that a lack of money isn't a good reason to end a position, right? However, the continuing resolution passed by the House might not cut deeply enough to provide that justification. And although layoff protections are sometimes characterized as stemming from laws in the 1940s and the 1970s, changeable only by Congress, many only come from regulations. And the Trump administration's OPM could change those regulations, though not quickly enough for the timeline spelled out in the OPM memo. But the OMB did not return any of their requests here from the Daily Wire, nor did the Department of Education, of course, about the layoffs. And what about buyouts and severance, though? The complexities around RIFs explain why the Trump administration sought a different path in the form of fork in the road buyouts, where employees voluntarily resign in exchange for 8 months of pay. I mean, that's pretty good, don't you think? The number of employees who took the buyout was underwhelming, though. Only about 75,000 actually did that. And that's less than half the number of employees who quit or retire from the federal government in any typical year, meaning that the buyout may have just given 8 months of free pay to people who already plan to retire or quit, but that's the chance that you take. And the fork in the road also spared teleworkers from having to come back to the physical office, but in many cases, employees laid off against their will could get similar pay, according to the OPM severance calculations. And employees get 1 week of pay for every year of service up to the first 10, and 2 weeks per year after that. But the severance can rise significantly for employees close to retirement. And it could be actually adding 7.5% for every year older than the age of 40. So a 45-year-old employee with 20 years of service making $78,000, let's say, would get a $71,000 severance pay, or about 11 months of pay. So after the fork in the road deadline, which was February 12th, by the way, OMB and OPM encouraged agencies to offer voluntary separation incentive payments, or VSIP buyouts, but those are like $25,000, comparing favorably to the RIF severance only for junior employees. So another option is firing employees for misconduct or poor performance, depriving them of RIF protections and rehiring eligibility. Typically, only 11,000 or 12,000 employees are fired for disciplinary or performance reasons per year. That's not a lot compared to the number of employees that work for the federal government. And that could be increased significantly by managers being more aggressive. However, policies could get in the way there too. And employees, put on a performance improvement plan have to be retained if there is evidence that they showed an improvement at all, for example. The administration could attempt strategies such as firing, rather than laying off, DEI employees for violating civil rights laws, though this would be a labor-intensive and likely result in a long period of appeals and lawsuits, of course. And the worst result could be a years-long process in which fired or laid-off employees are eventually reinstated with back pay, giving them hundreds of thousands of dollars in free money. Here's a quote. It says that the timeline is very difficult for a president with 4 years when these review boards take years to rule on these things. And the federal human resources officer confirmed this. I say, as we've seen for years now, that the liberal Democratic Party is the party of big government. There's just no two ways around it. So during this time of government layoffs, they have to come up with something to make you feel bad about cheering on cutting the DEI workers and whatnot. So I come across this article here by Sean Harper, who Harper is a university professor at Provost, a professor of education, public policy, and business at the University of Southern California, where it says he holds the Clifford and Betty Allen Chair in Urban Leadership, which whatever that means, right? But I found it kind of interesting because obviously he is on the side of poor DEI workers, but I wanted to go through it and kind of point out a few things here, because it says just days into his second term, President Donald Trump placed federal staff working on diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives on paid leave, with the intent of eventually laying them off. Workers who led DEI programs at University of Texas, University of Florida, and other higher education institutions located in states where conservative legislators eliminated DEI offices, programs, and positions have also recently lost their jobs. And then there are those workers who have lost their jobs at companies like Walmart and McDonald's and Meta, which have recently unraveled DEI efforts. Amidst the dramatic saga, we too often forget that the professionals who abruptly lost their jobs are people. The overwhelming majority of these workers who have lost their jobs are Americans, and many of them are women of color. Their humanity deserves compassion and appreciation. Okay, let's stop here. The people paying for their salaries are people, and they're Americans, and many of them are women of color. I mean, come on. Yes, these are people. They are losing their jobs, but this is a fact of life, is that your job probably is not something that just simply goes on forever. I mean, there was a time when you got out of high school, you got a job, and that was your career for life until you retired with a pension or whatever. That is not today. And these government workers, they have had it pretty nice, and they are doing things that are only hurting people. I mean, we're talking about DEI specialists here. But let's go on. It says, media coverage about the rollback of DEI activities has largely been focused on which programs and policies are being phased out, why such regression is occurring at this time, and what conservatives are misunderstanding and misrepresenting. In the context of education, attention also has been placed on the anticipated efforts of diverse students, but not enough emphasis is being devoted to the actual people who do high quality DEI work. Okay, there's no such thing as high quality DEI work, but anyway, professionals who are losing jobs, salaries, and stability. Plus, these workers have then had to endure President Donald Trump and other powerful lawmakers baselessly misrepresent their work as illegal and immoral and accuse them of being unqualified so-called DEI hires. Well, that is exactly what they are. They were DEI hires. They were hired to institute DEI into these federal agencies. Yes, a lot of these policies are illegal and definitely immoral if you call racism and bigotry immoral. But they go on. They say, immediately after the White House announced that federal DEI workers were being placed on administrative leave, hosts and guests on conservative cable news networks celebrated. Bye-bye DEI, posted the Fox News on Instagram. Perhaps they didn't realize that they were rejoicing the undeserved loss of American jobs. Maybe they didn't understand that those people who spent years, in some cases decades, attempting to make America truly great for all citizens suddenly may not be able to afford to pay rent or their mortgages. Okay, let's stop here again. Okay, these people were not attempting to make America truly great and and great for all citizens, because that's not what DEI does. DEI takes a look at your skin color, maybe your gender, or maybe who you think your gender is, and says, okay, we're going to give preferences to some and we're going to disadvantage others. That is bigotry, that is racism, that is sexism, that is and it's not making America truly great for all. But they go on and say that some of these workers now won't be able to afford daycare for their kids or elder care for their aging parents. Others have children in college whose tuition payments are suddenly in limbo because of politics. Some will lose their health care benefits. Too many of these workers will struggle to find other jobs because of the false narratives that are being told about DEI. Now is a terrible time for a DEI professional to find a job. Okay, again, let's stop. If their narrative really is that when you go to work for the government, you're taking a salary cut because you want to do something great in all this kind of stuff, right? If somebody just stayed in the private sector, they'd be making so much more money. But no, they're principled people, with morals, and they're working for the federal government and they're taking pay cuts to do it. Well, great. Then guess what? You're about to get a pay raise, aren't you? I mean, you can't have it both ways. That's talking out of both sides of your mouth. But they say maybe Trump and other DEI obstructionists, I love the word obstructionist, didn't fully consider this before they ruined these American workers' careers. Or perhaps they did, but ultimately were more interested in the prevention of preservation of an America that isn't equitable or inclusive. Is it possible that Trump wants heterosexual Christian white guys to permanently occupy the majority of top leadership positions in our nation under the guise of merit? You can just hear that, can't you? as he pens this. I mean, come on. This is exactly what I was just telling. This is proof of what I was just saying to be true. That if you are a heterosexual Christian white guy, then you're an oppressor and you need to be put at the bottom of the barrel. How is that making America great for everyone? It's not. But they go on, and it says it was ignorant and short-sighted to lay off federal DEI professionals without meeting with them, without experiencing their work firsthand, and without even attempting to confirm if the alleged widespread wrongdoings were true. The celebrating of firings of hardworking Americans on cable news shows, social media platforms, and conservative policy-making venues is cruel, they say. These people, as well as the Americans they serve, deserve better. Okay, so again, you see the venom here spewing here, and it's because they have to try to justify why we need all of these federal workers, why we need DEI instituted into every agency. We absolutely don't. But they were in the catbird seat. They thought that everything was going just great under the Biden administration, and he was hiring thousands and thousands of people. Mostly, hey, if you can teach DEI and you can put on a seminar, and you can write policy and you can institute all this kind of stuff, then you're hired. And now the tables have turned, and they're now out of work because they were trying to institute policies that were immoral, that were full of racism and bigotry. And we can't have that. And we are not having that. And things have turned. And now, again, there's hurdles here. Okay, the morning glory is pulling up all kinds of roots, but I think we're on the right track, and we'll keep an eye on it. I will be praying for the Trump administration and what they're doing here, and we'll be saying that we're going to be better off with this ivy gone, with this morning glory gone. But I would love to hear from you and what you think of it. Maybe you think that you have a differing opinion on this. I would love to hear from you. And of course, you can always do that at uncommonsensepodcast.com, and of course on YouTube now. And thanks for listening. This podcast is a production of Morganite Communications.